going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets presented by So Rare here on Game Plus Network. Also live on our FTN Network YouTube page. Mean Streets can be heard on iTunes and Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to your favorite or mediocre podcasts. We are right there for you. Mean Streets coming your way 5 days a week. We're now in the middle of August, just 2 weeks away from really football being here. I know it's like the first weekend of September. I think actually second weekend of September. Get that Thursday night football game in there, Chiefs and Lions. But it is here. We did a live draft over at Set Bet Spike this morning. Also, you can catch Set Bet Spike on Game Plus Network, of course, as well as our FTN Network YouTube page. We had some listeners, some viewers take part in the live draft. We did it over at Sleeper. It was a whole lot of fun. And on Thursday, Eric and I are going to get together and we're going to take part in a super flex mock draft on Sleeper as well. Deesh, first draft in the books. Football season is here. Oh, I love it. How'd it go? I think we've done like 100 drafts here on the show. It's not to say that it's mostly to say we have a problem, but we're here for you guys. And, you know, we like drafting. It's draft season. As you said, football season is officially here. We will talk week 2 of the preseason, things to look for. We talked a little bit about some takeaways yesterday on Game Plus Network on the episode of Mean Streets. We did another best ball draft and we touched on a couple players, and I think we called it perfectly on the show. We said Zeke was going to the Pats. We said it wouldn't be great for Ramondre Stevenson, Bats. And it's not ideal for Ramondre Stevenson. Dalvin Cook, now a member of the Jets, not ideal for Breece Hall, but this is like 2 really good situations in terms of real life football. Like, this is what it's all about. Like, we play fantasy for fun, but it's a real life football, NFL football. And these guys, you know, they're going to bring a lot to the table. I know a lot of people think that Zeke is completely washed, but he still has a lot to offer in terms of, you know, protecting the quarterback. And he's been one of the better goal line backs in the NFL over the past couple of years. Actually, Tony Pollard struggled in that situation last year. And Zeke did a really good job last year in that situation as well. So we'll get to those items in a minute. We are going to talk a lot of running backs on this show. Last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, we did like wide receiver rankings and tiers. A couple things have moved around. Rankings are always getting updated over at FTNfantasy.com. Always. Myself, Jeff Ratcliffe. I'm looking. Jeff, Mike Randall, Scott Spratt, Adam Pfeiffer, Tyler Lochner, Jeremy Pope. We got the Pope in there. Rankings, half point, full point, super flex, tight end premium, dynasty, rookie only. What do you want? We got it for you over at FTNfantasy.com. I'll share a couple of we're going to show you where those guys move in terms of Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook, Ramondre Stevenson, and Zeke in just a few minutes. We'll start here with some hot news off the top. I mean, you probably are already well aware, but Anthony Richardson was named the starting quarterback from the Colts here as of this morning. I'm not totally surprised, but I did think that it was possible that Gardner Minshew would begin the NFL season as the week 1 starter for the Colts. They're just throwing Anthony Richardson right in. Why not, right? I mean, they got this guy early in the draft. He did ball out in like the combine. He was, he's jumped high. He's jumped the furthest. Is he going to jump over his lineman and catch touchdowns in the end zone? No, he's not. But this is a guy that's going to be the week 1 starter in the NFL. And he's going to start to climb up draft boards a little bit. I had him as quarterback 10. I'm looking at my peers over at FTN, and I'm the highest on him, I guess. I'll give you a sneak peek. Ratcliffe's the GOAT. He's got him at 12. Randall's got him at 16. Scott's got him at 17. I have him at 10. Pfeiffer's got him at 14. Tyler's got him at 11. And Pope's got him at 12. Or 20, excuse me. So I think he's going to make some adjustments for sure. Our consensus is quarterback 14. The thing I will say about Anthony Richardson, I actually think Michael Pittman, his game may be better suited for Gardner Minshew. I think that Alec Pierce is probably better suited for a guy like Anthony Richardson. I think he runs crisper routes. And Michael Pittman's a good wide receiver. He's kind of like a contested catch guy. He's not really blowing anybody away with like separation or his route running ability, but he can go up and get it and he can bring it down. I mean, he's a good wide receiver. I'm not taking shots at him. There was a nice little play in the preseason game where Richardson kind of scrambled a little bit. Alec Pierce had a nice little Um, ran a nice route and he dropped the ball. It was like right near the end zone. Anthony Richardson can be the worst passer in the NFL this season. I don't think he's going to lose his job. The Colts aren't like a Super Bowl contending squad. They can think that they are all they want. They're not. Um, you go look back at Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow was an awful passer. He didn't really do anything with his arm. When he threw a touchdown, it was great. Does anybody remember the playoff game against the Steelers? Oh man, I was on the wrong side of that. I'll never forget it. When Tim Tebow was like the first or second play in overtime against the Steelers, and it was a touchdown pass. Demaryius Thomas, RIP, one of the goats, and took it to the house. And it was like, whoa, I didn't think anybody saw that coming because he wasn't really a pocket passer and he wasn't very accurate. But Tim Tebow was a top 12 fantasy quarterback because he ran around. Blake Bortles was a top 12 fantasy quarterback. He ran around. Now, Blake Bortles actually had a pretty nice season with Allen Robinson, like 14, 15 touchdowns one year. But these quarterbacks, I mean, Justin Fields is a great example as well. I mean, he throws for 2,200 passing yards and like just barely double-digit touchdowns. And he's quarterback 6 in fantasy points per game. So we've seen this time in and time out. I think for me personally, I love to, and it's not thinking, I want a top 8 quarterback. I want, if it's not the first tier, and it doesn't have to be the first tier of Mahomes and Hurts and Allen, the second tier with Lamar and Fields and Burrow. And Fields and Burrow, I find, are falling down a little bit. I think Fields could be just an absolute. I think he's way more room for him to grow because of the addition of DJ Moore, and we saw it firsthand in the preseason game. I don't care if it was a 1-yard pass; he took it to the house. And Dante Pettis and Equanimeous St. Brown, these guys are not taking that ball to the house. DJ Moore has that kind of explosiveness. He's been one of the yak monsters up near the top in terms of yards after the catch since he's entered the league, and he's 7th among wide receivers in receiving yards since 2019. And he's been a good wide receiver that doesn't get the touchdowns like some of those other elite wide receivers that are in that grouping of receiving yards since 2019. But he's a guy that is explosive, yards per catch, yards after the catch, great right running ability, and he's going to do some great things for Justin Fields. So I think there's even more room for Fields to grow. Even if you don't think he's going to get 1,100 rushing yards, I think his prop is at like 800. We have him for just under 800 rushing yards, and Ratcliffe's usually pretty conservative with his projections. So even if he improves, we give him 3,200 passing yards, maybe he throws an 8 to 10 more touchdowns. Like, this is a guy that there's more room for him to grow. But I want a top 8 quarterback. I'm fine here with Anthony Richardson. Of course, I got him at 10. In the same tier with like Deshaun Watson and Dak and Geno Smith. I think people may be playing the streaming game with some of these guys after the first 8. If you draft one of the first 8 quarterbacks, you don't need a second quarterback, especially if it's a single quarterback league. You're only starting one. It's not a super flex. You just roll those guys out. You roll them out in all tough matchups. They're all matchup proof, including Fields. He showed us last year. Matchups against the Bills and the Pats down the stretch of the season, he was just fine. So all those guys are quarterback proof. And, you may think that Deshaun Watson is kind of quarterback, matchup proof, and Dak Prescott, Geno did show us last year, pretty solid. He struggled down the stretch of the season. There's some tougher matchups against the Niners and the Jets, but overall he was, he's a top 10 quarterback. He was, I think, 7th in fantasy points per game, came with a nice little rushing floor, 300 rushing yards. Not design runs, but he can scramble. It's not part of his game, but he did show us last year that there was a little bit of a floor when it came to his rushing upside as well. I think Anthony Richardson, again, like if you're drafting today, he's going to move up. We've been talking about him, on best ball drafts, and Jake Seeley took him in his flex league. And I think that was the right call to take. He was the last, he read the room. He was the last person to take a quarterback. It was a single quarterback league. Nobody else is drafting 2 quarterbacks, really. You drafted 2 and maybe you want a second. Daniel Jones, you just roll out there because of the rushing floor. I think Dak and Deshaun, I could maybe consider myself benching them for other quarterbacks in better spots, maybe a Cousins or maybe a Derek Carr, or who knows, Brock Purdy as well. Brock Purdy and Jordan Love and Derek Carr, 3 guys I really like in super flex formats. But Anthony Richardson, we've been talking about drafting him and then pairing him up with a Geno or a Daniel Jones or somebody that we know is going to start week 1. But now he is going to start week 1, and we know that. And as I mentioned, he could be the worst passing quarterback in the NFL this season and still finish as a top 12, top 14 quarterback in fantasy. It's a different game now. I think you want to have a quarterback with a rushing floor, because those dud games, like when Kirk Cousins says a primetime game where maybe he only throws 1 touchdown, he finishes with single-digit fantasy points. When Justin Fields or, Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones only throws for one passing touchdown, they're probably still going to finish with 15 plus fantasy points because what they can do on the ground with their legs. So that's all I'll say about Anthony Richardson. Throwing him right into the fire. I think this is different than San Fran with Trey Lance, who's really fallen down the board here. Hasn't played a lot of football over the past couple of years. Was also raw like Anthony Richardson coming out of college. But the Niners traded up, and they kind of were in their window when they traded up. They had aspirations to win the Super Bowl. I don't think the Colts do. They can afford to just throw Richardson into the fire. But I'll tell you what, they really need to have Jonathan Taylor under center as well. That guy is going to help out Anthony Richardson, going to help out this offense. We talked before about the massive difference in terms of just them moving the football when it's not Jonathan Taylor on the field. I know he's with the team now in camp. We'll keep an eye on his situation. We'll get into running backs in just a second. So we had the Zeke news here, signed a 1-year contract with the New England up to $6 million. So again, he's been kind of rumored and linked to the Pats for quite some time. We've been telling people to avoid Breece Hall and to avoid Ramondre Stevenson in drafts. Now Breece Hall has turned into probably a 6th, 7th round pick. I know he's off the PUP list today. And Zeke is somebody that we talked about. I took in the flex league. I think I have it here. I can show you guys in a second. But Dalvin Cook signs the deal, the 1-year, $8.6 million deal here with the Jets. And this was the flex league squad for myself. Took Zeke here in the 11th round, 8th pick in the 11th round. I think roughly RB 50. I've moved him, and we'll show the ranks here in a second, but I've moved him to around 40. I've kind of kept Ramondre very similar, the same, a couple spots down. I definitely think Zeke is going to cut into Ramondre's workload, especially near the goal line. I think that's very possible. That's something that we could see happen. But Ramondre, I mean, he was a big-time player in the passing game. He did kind of cool off towards the end of last season. And these teams are just, they want to bring in other backs. They want to have a bit of a committee, and I understand it. It's kind of the way to go, what people should do. I have moved down Cook, roughly RB26, and actually I moved him up a touch. He kind of stayed the same, actually. Breece is the guy that has moved down. I mean, I had this guy as a low end RB1. I'm a big fan of his talent, but the Jets, it's very telling. The Jets have brought in several running backs. They've had Cook there for, a few days and with the team and camp and seeing everything that's happening. And the Jets are just, they're all in, man. This is a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. The defense is legit. They almost made the playoffs last year with those brutal arms at the quarterback position, like Zach Wilson and Joe Flacco and Mike White. Now you got Aaron Rodgers, even though coming off one of his worst seasons of all time. It's Aaron Rodgers. It's a different Rodgers. It's a motivated A-Rod who's with the squad, building a rapport with some of his guys, familiar with Nathaniel Hackett, familiar with Alan Lazard. Randall Cobb is there. I mean, he's not going to be a fantasy player, but in situations he may get on the field in like 3rd and 4th, and he may be a go-to guy for Rodgers in some of those situations. But this team now has one of the better 1-2 punches out of the backfield in Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook. It's kind of a stay away for me in fantasy. I think Breece Hall will probably take a step back in the first few weeks, ease them into the work, and maybe they'll ride the hot hand when both of these guys are great. Breece Hall has the higher ceiling. I do believe that, even though Cook has had some great seasons on his NFL resume. He's a great pass catcher as well. They could really lean on him at the start of the season, and then maybe it's a bit of a committee, and it's a situation in fantasy that's just not ideal. So let's I think that's it. If in case you missed the episode last week with Aaron Schatz on Friday, we got the FTN Football Almanac 2023 version. Live over at ftnfantasy.com. It was like 450 plus pages here, team previews, player profiles, 500 plus player profiles from a fantasy football perspective. Of course, you got the cutting edge DVOA metrics. It's all there for you in the Almanac, and it's a fantastic read, and felt a little bit smarter after that for sure. No question about it. Let's get into the running back tiers. Let's start. We're 15 minutes in. We haven't even really addressed it. So let's get after it. It's a heavy running back show. If you want some baseball picks, I mean, Frank is red hot. I think he went 4-0 yesterday. The article that I wrote over at ftnbets.com, read it every Monday, actually was a perfect 4-0 as well. I was just picking on the Halos. Like, the Angels are just disgusting. We had Max Scherzer for over 7.5 strikeouts. We had Scherzer for 7K and the win. We had the Rangers over 4.5 runs, 2 units, and we had Texas on the run line. I think they won 12-0. Great. It feels awesome to be an Angels fan. If you want picks, ftnbets.com/free. Sign up and get those picks. Tier one for me is 2 guys. I know tier one for some people, Jake Seeley, shout out, is just Christian McCaffrey. I think Ratcliffe has CMC and Austin Eckler in tier one. Christian McCaffrey, 13 touchdowns in 14 games at San Fran. This is like this is the perfect situation for him in a Kyle Shanahan offense. The Kyle Shanahan's got the most of his running backs for years, and now he's got the GOAT and Christian McCaffrey. It's not going to be the same type of usage for CMC as we've seen in Carolina. They want to keep this guy fresh. They got Super Bowl aspirations. The Niners are favorites, of course, to win the NFC West. I think Seattle will push them. I think they'll surprise some people, but the Niners should win the division. It's top heavy. They're going to just crush teams, with their defense and the offense that they have. So we'll see some Elijah Mitchell at times like we did last season. Just keeping CMC fresh is the biggest thing, but he's fifth overall for me. It's still the wide receivers in Jamar Chase, first Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Cooper Kupp and Tyreek Hill. I still would go the 4 wide receivers before I get involved with CMC. So he's fifth overall for me. But the 13 touchdowns, total touchdowns, right? He's like a walking 100 yards. He's going to catch passes. He's going to run behind that offensive line, and it's a good one. And 13 TDs in 14 games. And is he going to get 16, 17 touchdowns this year? He may be a touchdown per game guy. I don't think anybody should be shocked about that. Austin Eckler, 107 catches last season, 17 touchdowns. He's got 38 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, and that is number one among running backs over the last 2 years. Eckler has been a lot of talk for years, right? The Chargers have tried to grab somebody for him to kind of ease off, I would say, the first and second down carries for Austin Eckler. He is obviously, he wants a contract. He wants to get paid. There's some of that's going on with him as well. It's a new look offense with Kellen Moore. They're going to push the ball down the field. I think that Justin Herbert will be untapped, unleashed. Like, I think he'll hit his true potential, his true upside. It might take a little bit with the new offensive coordinator in town, but I know it was just a preseason game, but we really saw something different from the Chargers in just that one game than we did last year and years past, because even Keenan Allen said it. How is this offense different? Well, we're pushing the ball down the field. Quentin Johnson drafted. Mike Williams can go down and get it. Austin Eckler, as I mentioned, 107 grabs last season. He's a guy that can go down the field and get it as well. So I think that this offense will be a little bit different. I think it's going to be more pass happy, and that does benefit a guy like Eckler. He's one of those guys that he really only needs 15 touches. Like CMC, these guys really only need 15 to 17 touches, whether it's maybe 10 carries and 5 or 6 targets out of the backfield to, be high NRB1s. Like these are the guys, because they're in that tier of their own, that these are guys that I expect like 50 plus grabs. Like I expect them to be catching 3 or 4 passes on every given Sunday. Like these are guys that are going to be involved on really good offenses. So they're in their tier on their own. But as I mentioned with the Chargers, they have tried to do different things, like whether it's Justin Jackson, draft Joshua Kelly, draft Larry Roundtree, draft Isaiah Spiller. And it just doesn't seem to, none of those guys really seem to be good enough to cut into what Austin Eckler can do. And I don't think we need to be worried. Austin Eckler has been it's been number one in terms of just red zone touches, carries, targets, near the goal line. It's all been him, and he does a great job of finding the end zone. Touchdowns are hard to predict, but Eckler seems to score them pretty easily. So those are the 2 guys in the first tier for me. Tier 2, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, Jonathan Taylor, and Josh Jacobs. I thought about moving Jonathan Taylor and Josh Jacobs out of this tier into tier 3. I thought about putting them in their own tier as just like question marks, headaches. I thought about all that stuff. But at the end of the day, if these guys are healthy, they belong in this tier. Taylor is with the team. I know he wants a contract. I know Josh Jacobs wants a contract. I get it. These guys want contracts. Saquon wants a contract. Tony Pollard wants a contract. I mean, these guys all want to get paid. My thing with Josh Jacobs is heartbeat of the offense last year. Led the NFL in rushing yards, like 1,600 rushing yards. His rushing prop is like 1,000 yards. I kind of lean to the over on that. I think he's going to play football. But, and maybe I'm overthinking this, there's 2 things that worry me about Josh Jacobs, and Josh Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor are completely off my list. I don't want to draft them. Remember, I do not draft list. I'm not taking these guys. I would take Jonathan Taylor if we follow the 4th round. I don't think he is. He's living in the 3rd now. Jacobs, we took yesterday in the best ball draft to start the 4th. I think I picked in the 12th spot. And I think to start the 4th, I took Josh Jacobs. If those guys are hanging out on the 4th, I'll roll the dice. But typically, I like to get myself an alpha running back. We'll give some love to Chubb in a second. and then I'm attacking wide receivers. Maybe I get involved with the tight end and quarterback, and then I get back into the running backs, the hero RB, punt RB2 strategy that I just love. And I will attack Javonte Williams in the 6th, Rashad White in the 7th. Isaiah Pacheco is sitting there. There's some running backs that I like in that range that we'll address here on this show. But Josh Jacobs had 300 plus carries last year. Typically, when somebody has that kind of workload, they just regress the next year. Maybe it's an injury. Maybe they're just scaling back a bit. I'm sure there's some things that he's frustrated about. Maybe he powered through last year with some injuries. Maybe if he has, a stinger on a shoulder injury, maybe he won't play that game. Maybe he only plays 14 games. And we see a little bit more. Zamir White is the guy that Josh McDaniels drafted. Like, that's the guy that they drafted. They didn't pick up that 5th-year option when he came over as the head coach last year. And maybe he had plans for Zamir White. Is this the New England way where they start to use all kinds of different running backs? I mean, all those things are certainly possible. But when Josh Jacobs is on the field, I mean, he's a good back. And he's a guy that not a lot of people think as a pass-catching running back. And before, I'm not taking shots at anybody, people would say, I don't want Josh Jacobs because the Raiders are awful. And, the game script doesn't go the Raiders' way. He doesn't get on the field to catch passes. That's just not true. Last year, I think he's back-to-back years, like 50-plus grabs. Like, this is a guy that will catch the rock. It's a different quarterback in Jimmy G. But, he's shown that he's not afraid to dump it off to the backs as well. I'm just a little concerned. And I think we should be concerned with Taylor, and we should be concerned with Josh Jacobs. Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, Jonathan Taylor, and Josh Jacobs. I've come around a little bit here on Bijan Robinson. I still have him 5th. End of the 1st for me. I know in the 2 flex leagues in New York at the Perfect Pint, Bijan Robinson was RB2 off the board in both of those drafts. I just still have a hard time taking him over Chubb or Saquon. I got a couple shares in best ball formats, and I'm fine with that. With so many question marks at the running back position, that's where I've kind of come around a little bit on Bijan. As for Nick Chubb, 2nd and 3rd in rushing yards in the last 2 years, 1st in rushing yards since 2021. He's had 1,000 yards in 4 of his 5 seasons. The 1 year he didn't was his rookie campaign. I think he was just like 5 or 6 yards shy of the 1,000 yards. He's never had a season under 5 yards per carry. I think he's the best pure runner in the game behind arguably one of the better offensive lines in the game. He touched career highs last year in rushing yards with 1,525. He had 302 attempts and 13 touchdowns. Kareem Hunt is gone. Don't think he's coming back to Cleveland. No idea where he's going. He's visiting a team every other day that ends with Y. But 120 plus carries last year from Kareem Hunt, including 25 in the red zone and 45 targets and 30 grabs. Jerome Ford, I get it. Every once, Jerome Ford, nice little shiny toy. Maybe he catches a couple passes to the backfield, nice little flyer. But he's not going to fill that Kareem Hunt role. The guy's got like 3 touches on his NFL resume. He's not going to come in and get 120 carries. He's not going to get 25 red zone carries unless something happens to Nick Chubb. And I don't think he's going to get 45 targets. So I think we could see 2,000 total yards here from Nick Chubb. I think he still kind of flirts with 1,500 rushing yards. He had another season just under 1,500. I don't know how many carries how many more carries can he get? Like, is he going to have 350 carries? No, I don't think so. But he's not going to be taken off in these red zone packages. So maybe he gets a few more touchdowns. I think he could live in the 400 receiving yard range. Chubb was on pace for 50 grabs in his sophomore season before they brought in Hunt at the halfway point. And he averaged just over 2 catches per game in his final 7 games as a rookie. He can catch. It's not that he can't catch. When people say that he can't catch, it's like, what are you even talking about? I was at First Energy Stadium in Cleveland. I saw him catch like 4 or 5 passes in one game. It was like a highlight reel grab, like his left arm, and he brought it to the house. Like, he's a good all-around running back. This is, teams bring in these guys, and it was a good 1-2 punch. It was a really good 1-2 punch a couple of years ago. Hunt struggled. It was one of his worst seasons in Cleveland in terms of forced tackles missed and yards after contact. It was pretty bad for him. I get that they moved on. If last year's sign, only 6 games together, Deshaun Watson and Nick Chubb, 10 catches, it doesn't seem like a whole lot, but that's like 35 maybe. Maybe he's pushing 40. 5 catches on 6 targets in week 18, 45 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. Don't be shocked, guys, if Nick Chubb, who is, according to Vegas, the favorite to lead the NFL in rushing yards, if Nick Chubb gets 45 catches, he may just get 2,000 total yards. He may just. So I'm a big Nick Chubb fan. I've been taking him in the first round. And I love my wide receivers, and I've just been going alpha. And here's a look in the flex league. Took him here in the 8 spot. Didn't touch the running back position again until round 6. Javonte, my backs are thin. I would have liked to get, gotten Rashad White or Cook. It just didn't. Pacheco just didn't work out for me there. But Khalil Herbert, I think, is a pretty good target. Dalvin Cook will move up draft boards. Uh, there's a lot of running backs, and we'll get to them here in a second that you could take. But Chubb, let him be your anchor, let him be your alpha, then attack wide receivers, and then you can get back into the running backs in just a little bit. Anybody else on that list that I should address? I think they're all pretty much. I mean, Bijan Robinson. Again, Bijan Robinson, we have projected for. Let me give you a little bit of a sneak peek in terms of our projections. I am the lowest on him compared to everybody else at FTN. I talked about Anthony Richardson off the top of the show. Bijan Robinson, Jeff's got him at 3. Mike's got him at 5. Actually, wow, Scott Spratt has him at 9. That's right. He's a big Tyler Algier guy. I have him at as you see here, 5. Adam's got him at 4. Tyler and Pope have him at 3. Our projections show. Let me give them up right quick. The thing about with Bijan Robinson, I mean, he's a much different back than Tyler Algier. I mean, there's no question about that. What he can do with his legs, he's explosive after the catch. He's a true bell cow back. I mean, he's going to catch probably 40 plus passes. We have him projected for 1,100 rushing yards, 9.8 touchdowns. We have him for 59 targets, 46 grabs, and just under 340 receiving yards and 1.8 receiving touchdowns. So that's 249 points in a half-point setting. So like 242 points, excuse me. I mean, to put that in perspective, I mean, Jeff's got CMC for 246, Eckler for 243, and then Bijan for 242, and he's got Nick Chubb at 242 as well. Just like a point behind, and Saquon's right there. Derrick Henry's right there as well. So same tier, kind of splitting hairs. What I will say is Tyler Algier did get 1,000 yards on 200 carries. It's a good offensive line. Arthur Smith is a great play caller, and especially when it comes to running the football, right? With all of his different schemes and what he did with Derrick Henry. And I mean, Henry's a beast, but it did take a little bit of time. They spent the draft capital on him. I don't think it's going to be right away where Bijan's getting 20 touches. I think we could see Algier just in the first couple weeks, and then just talent and the skill set will overtake. Like I said, I'm just a little bit hesitant to take him over some of those running backs, but he is a guy that will probably get 1,400, could be 1,300 total yards from him. But catching balls out of the backfield is a big plus. Saquon, he's fine. Maybe we'll get a little receiving touchdowns in his life this year, but he's good. He's back. He is the heartbeat and the engine of the New York Giants offense. And they brought in some other skilled players. Maybe this offense will be a little bit better this season. Derrick Henry, I mean, there's really not a whole lot to say about Henry. Career high in terms of targets and receiving yards last year, something that we thought would happen. We said it on this show because in 2021, he was limited to 8 games. He had 23 fantasy points per game, which was number 1. Taylor had 20, which is number 2. He's on pace for 400 carries. Maybe that's why he got hurt. But 349 attempts last season, RB3 in fantasy points per game, RB4 overall in a half-point setting. But we started to see, the catches and the targets go up in 2021 towards the end of last season, maybe mostly because of some of the lack of weapons, of course, in Tennessee's offense. But 33 catches, 41 targets, 398 receiving yards, career highs for him, 2 catches per game, 2.5 targets. Doesn't seem like a whole lot, right? He had 18 grabs and 20 targets, missed half the season in 2021. But ultimately, they got Hopkins, and you hope Treylon stays healthy. But why wouldn't you give this guy 2 targets per game, right? Just let him have 2 targets per game and give him one of those as a screen pass. I mean, he's such a freak. He's hard to tackle. So that was a nice added boost to his upside for Derrick Henry. And I do believe that will carry over into this season. The offensive line is not great. It's probably one of the worst in all football. We're all waiting. And I say that, and it's such a bad thing to say, but everybody is kind of wondering when he's going to fall off, right? There's a lot of tread on the tires, a lot of carries over the past couple of years, a lot of playoff games, like 28 carries and things like that. They did draft Tajay Spears. We've seen when Henry has gone down, like Deontay Foreman was pretty solid. Tajay Spears, I think, is an okay little dart throw. I think I'd rather a guy like Tank Bigsby or Devon A-Chain or Sean Johnson. But Henry, I mean, until we see it, this guy's still going to be a top 3, top 5 in terms of touches overall. And he's still probably only going to get like 30 catches, and he's still going to finish overall as like a guy that will have second or third most touches in the NFL. Of course, if something does happen. So Henry, a lot of people are we did this last year. I don't want Henry follow the third round. You got Henry, and you had yourself an anchor, and it kind of fits that mold as like a punt RB2 or hero RB in there as well. The only thing I will say about Pollard is he did struggle as a goal line back last year. I think 3 for 7, and no Zeke. Doesn't seem like the team is too worried about it. They didn't draft anyone really. Deuce Vaughn is kind of turning heads. His father is the assistant in terms of scouting director for Dallas. Kind of reminds me of Darren Sproles. I mean, he's small like Sproles, hard to tackle. I mean, he could be something. I've moved him up in my rankings a little bit. I think he's a very interesting like third, fourth round pick in rookie only drafts as well. He's very tiny. Like he's not going to be a guy that carries the rock a lot. Pollard will be the lead, but you can count on one hand how many times Tony Pollard had 20 carries. Yeah, he was great last year. He was explosive, but they may miss Zeke. Sometimes just having a change of pace guy. Zeke comes in, gives Pollard a breather, pass protection, some goal line stuff there. So that's what I'm interested to see if I'm with everybody else. Pollard is like, Mayo's got him like RB3. He thinks Pollard is just like going to have 300 plus touches. He's going to be the GOAT. He's going to be great. And I know I'm not going to say that Mayo is wrong about that, but I think there may be times where Pollard could struggle inside the red zone, or maybe Dak's calling his own number again. We saw that a couple years ago where he was, some bootlegs and he was rushing a little bit more, but he's had some injuries. That's all I'll say about Pollard. I think he's fine. All these guys are fine as we wrap up tier 2. They're all fine. I have no issues with any of them besides Taylor and Jacobs. Tier 3. We'll move a little bit quicker here. Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, Ramondre Stevenson, Travis Etienne, J.K. Dobbins. So I haven't moved Ramondre really that much. Najee and Mixon are ahead of him now. As for Mixon hasn't been super efficient. RB12 and a half point setting last year. 60 grabs, was top 5 among running backs. He had 75 targets. That was 7th at the running back position in terms of targets. 26th in rushing yards. 14 games he played. 27th in rushing yards per game. Like, that's not great. 3.9 yards per carry, 4 for his career. Jay Morrison talked about the offensive line. He thinks it's going to be much better this year in Cincy. And he also mentioned the possible suspension for Joe Mixon with this civil case open now back up. And he did say that he didn't think the Bengals would suspend Joe Mixon. He said the league could come in and potentially suspend him, but maybe Chase Brown needs to be on your radar. But he also did say, even with Samaje Perine gone, that Mixon wouldn't play any third down roles. He wouldn't be in the 2-minute drill. And it's just something that we just haven't seen over the past couple of years. And maybe it's Chris Evans or Chase Brown's that they take that role. But even still, with Mixon not having that role, like 60 grabs, 75 targets, like he is still involved through the air from Joe Burrow. Linked to a good offense, no issues there. Najee Harris, I get it. I love Jalen Warren too. But Najee Harris looked much more like himself in the second half of last season. Remember, he had a Liz Frank injury to start the season, and this is a run-first team. We talked about the rush pace of certain teams. I think we got it right here. I can bring it up. Like, this is what we talked about from, the Steelers are not even on here. Wow. Why did I even bring it up? But I think it was an overall situation where they may have just missed this list, but they are going to be a run heavy team or run first team. And Tomlin does have a history of just leaning on one running back. So I'm not completely sold that even Warren was getting some love down the stretch of last season, and especially inside the receiving game, a lot of like 3-4 catch games from him down the stretch of the season. But Najee's a good pass catcher as well, and I think he's going to be the guy there. As for Ramondre, I tweeted it out a little bit earlier, just according to our market share tool over at ftnfantasy.com. Ramondre Stevenson had a 56% run share and a 63% opportunity share to the backfield in 2022. And Jacobs led the way with like 80% rush share. Does that number go up or down with Zeke in there? Damian Harris averaged 9.6 rushing attempts per game last season. Does Zeke get 9.6? I think that's a fair number, maybe 8. But I think he can offer more than Damian Harris did. And I think he can offer a little bit more inside the red zone, inside the goal line. But Ramondre Stevenson, I still think he's going to be an elite pass catcher. And last season, when you look at some of his numbers, he was 4th among running backs in targets. He was 3rd among running backs in catches. He was 4th in catches. Only CMC, Eckler, Fournette had more catches than him. He had 69. He had 88 targets, which was 3rd at the running back position behind CMC and Eckler. But it was also 2nd on his team. He was 2nd on his team in targets. he may just be again. Like Juju, I expect to lead the way in terms of targets and catches. Devontae Parker doesn't really do much for me. He hasn't shown me that he can really stay healthy. Tyquan Thornton's a nice little young wide receiver that I think, I'd much rather have than Parker. There's multiple tight ends there. I think that Ramondre is still going to be fine. I think he's still going to be fine. He may fall to the end of the third or early fourth. I think, if you can get him as your RB2, that's great. He's still going to catch a lot of passes out of the backfield. He's still the better back than Zeke. I don't think Zeke is totally dust, but Ramondre is still a really good player, and I haven't moved him too much. At the end of tier one here, we got Travis Etienne and J.K. Dobbins. I like Tank Bigsby like everybody else. I hear the coaching staff talking him up. We've given a lot of love to Tank Bigsby on this show as well. Travis Etienne is a guy that could get some first and second down and some red zone looks taken away from him. JaMychal Hasty did that. Trevor Lawrence was calling his own number in the red zone. Like, all these things are certainly possible when it comes to Travis Etienne, but he's also a guy that I think, kind of like J.K. Dobbins, like both of these guys could, get 100 total yards on like 15 touches. The offenses are that good. Boxes will not be stacked against Jacksonville. There's just too many other weapons to worry about. Trevor Lawrence had the breakout in year 2, like most first-round quarterbacks do in year 2. More room to grow in year 3 and year 2 with Doug Peterson. And as for J.K. Dobbins, I wrote up as a target a couple weeks ago. He's a guy that I like, even though I'm usually getting the alpha running back and I'm kind of avoiding this tier. I think that J.K. Dobbins is a decent pick. He could be in for a breakout campaign. He's only played 23 games since 2020. But, down the stretch of his rookie season, he was really good. He racked up just over 800 yards on 134 carries, so that's 6 yards per carry. He also chipped in with 18 catches. A lot of excitement down the stretch of the season, 8 touchdowns in his final 8 games, including 2 playoff games where he scored. And then last year, 2021 was a write-off. He didn't play. He got hurt before the season. But last year when he came back, 420 rushing yards on 92 carries, and he wasn't 100%. That's 5.7 yards per carry. It's a different offense here in Baltimore this year with Todd Monken in town. They ran 11 personnel fewer than any team in the NFL last year. It's going to be a hard offense to defend. You got to worry about Mark Andrews as the mismatch that he brings to the table. Odell Beckham Jr., we haven't seen him in quite some time, but he's going to garner attention. He's a great route runner with good hands. Zay Flowers is just going to see a lot of one-on-one, and he's a terrific route runner. I'm really interested in Zay Flowers. And then you have Rashad Bateman stretching the field a little bit. You got to worry about Lamar Jackson and J.K. Dobbins. Like, it's going to be a really tough offense to defend. And I think there's a lot to like about J.K. Dobbins. And I know I've said this before. He was my breakout before he got hurt in 2021. But ultimately, this is a guy that I believe in. Like, his last 4 games in 2022, the yards, even on minimal touches, like 17 for 93, 12 for 59, 13 for $125, 15 for $120. He isn't a back that needs 20-plus carries a game to be effective. Even at about 75% last year, we saw those numbers, which are pretty solid from him. And that's the same way I feel about J.K. Dobbins. That's why I have him in there. Into tier, sneak peek. Into tier, is another sneak peek? George, you're screwing me up here a little bit. Do we have, this is where we're at. 1, 2, and 3. Is this 4 and 5? 6 and 7? 8? Do we not have 4 and 5? Maybe we don't have 4 and 5. 1 minute. He'll find me 4 and 5. We'll go back here to 1, 2, and 3. Maybe we don't. Maybe I messed that up for you. Let's see. Live television, folks. Live television. Oh yeah, 4 and 5. Can you get that one in for me? It's do you see it? I can get it in if you can't. I'm gonna get it in. I'm gonna save it, and then I'll jump it in. Because the file said tier 4, but it was actually tier 8. So I got it. I'm all over it here. Bear with me. Live television. The drum roll. Who could be in this tier? Who could it be? Let's get rid of Cook. And we'll get tier 4 and 5 in our life. All right. We are off and running. Oh, there it is. We got it at the same time. Live television. We love it. Game Plus Network. Can we get a bats too? Let's get a bats in here. Okay, tier 4 and tier 5. I see some people hanging out now at this time. Like, we just had the room like really. No Aaron Jones. Shake my head. Well, there's Aaron Jones. Like, he's got 6 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 years with Aaron Rodgers under center. It's a committee. Why am I taking Aaron Jones so early? Aaron Jones is in this tier for me. Aaron Jones has been a really good running back. He's a great running back. He's in a committee. He's in a committee with A.J. Dillon, who is the goal line back in Green Bay. So why am I taking Aaron Jones that early? I'm just not doing it. Again, Aaron Jones, 6 rushing touchdowns over the last couple of years. A big part of his game has been through the air with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is gone. Jordan Love is now under center. I think that they will lean on the ground game with both of these guys, but I'm not taking Aaron Jones, who's in a committee, and he's not even going to be the goal line back there. So that's my issue with Aaron Jones. Here in tier 4, Miles Sanders, Cam Akers, Dameon Pierce, Aaron Jones, Jahmyr Gibbs, Javonte Williams, Alvin Kamara, Rashad White, Alexander Mattison, and Kenneth Walker. My issue with Kenneth Walker, I have him a lot lower than other people here. So Kenneth Walker, there's some good and there's some bad. There's some good, 11th in carries, 3rd in red zone touches, 13th in opportunity share. The boom would be, explosive run rate was 4th. He ranked 1st in percentage of his yards from explosive runs. Is that boom or bust? Kind of a little bit of both. 9 touchdowns, 1,000 yards, and 11 starts. It's great. 200 carries and 1K is great. Here's the negative. 2 for 9 inside the 5. His success rate out of 42 qualified backs with 100 carries, he was 41. So he's middle of the pack in rush EPA per carry. Just talked about most of his yards from the explosive run. You can't take it away. It's great to see it, but he wasn't great in short yardage situations. He wasn't great near the goal line, and he didn't run any routes. So he's not going to get any receiving work. And Seattle drafted a running back in the 2nd round again after they did it the year before with Kenneth Walker. As I feel the same way. Why am I taking Kenneth Walker, RB 14-15 as Aaron Jones when there's a committee, and is more so a committee in Green Bay than Seattle? I'm just kind of speculating that Zach Charbonnet will get some touches and he'll get some carries. It's just going to happen. Javonte Williams, talked about him a lot. I'm not worried about Javonte Williams. He's on the field. He's active. He's away, off the pup list. He's been taking some hits. And Javonte Williams, this time we were taking him in the 1st round. I think Sean Payton will do wonders for Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine. This offense isn't going to be the worst offense in football. Alvin Kamara suspended 3 games. When he's back, he's going to be a top 12 running back. He's always a top 12 running back, even missing time and even in a committee. We're not going to see Taysom Hill in there stealing touches inside the red zone. Derek Carr gave a bunch of dump offs to Josh Jacobs. Kamara's going to eat. He's going to get his catches. Pierce, I just like overall as a running back. Yeah, I have some worries about Houston overall as a team and the quarterback play for sure. But I don't think Singletary is going to steal a whole lot of touches from him overall. I think Pierce is a guy that I like. Actually, I know he's a guy that I like. But again, I'm not really living in that early range. I'm with my RB2 like Javonte Williams, Rashad White. Mattison, I don't think will be super efficient. I think we'll see some Ty Chandler in our life. Jahmyr Gibbs is great. If he plays a DeAndre Swift role, then Montgomery on the right side here is RB29 in tier 5. We'll take some goal line carries from him. I mean, he's a good back. His metrics are not fantastic, but he's going to a much better situation. The offensive line in Chicago last year, one of the worst. Detroit, one of the better ones. It's going to be a 1-2 punch. You can use both of these guys, and Gibbs is going to catch a lot of passes out of the backfield. Montgomery could do that as well, especially with no Jameson Williams to start the season. Pacheco, I gave a lot of love to this morning, but in case you missed the Set Bet Spike episode, well, that's okay. You can go back and watch it if you want. But Pacheco really came on the stretch. On the stretch of the season came on. Like he it is a pass happy offense. I will say that. Andy Reid has done a great job with his running backs from Brian Westbrook, LaShawn McCoy, Jamal Williams, Kareem Hunt, all those guys. I mean, this is why everybody went crazy about CEH, who, by the way, is still in the squad, but didn't really get a whole lot from CEH in the 3 years here. But Pacheco, this was a 7th round pick. Had to learn the playbook, was behind all those guys. Pacheco, he was behind McKinnon, he was behind CEH, he was behind a lot of guys, and he worked his way up from week 10 to week 18. He averaged 14 carries, 70 rushing yards per game. He was RB 17.5 point setting over that span. Down the stretch of the season, he was catching passes, 10 grabs in his last 7 games. Doesn't seem like a whole lot, but he only had 3 catches in his first 10 games. He finished the 2022 regular season with 4 rushing touchdowns in his final 7 games. He was great in the Super Bowl, 15 for 76 and a touchdown. He had another playoff game with like 5 grabs. I think like actually 6 grabs, 7 targets, 65 yards. McKinnon's the pass catching back inside this offense for sure. But Pacheco is also, on the field, running routes and practice and catching some passes from Patrick Mahomes at the moment as well. So he came on strong towards the end of last season. In year 2 in this offense, understanding the playbook, more room to grow. And the more room to grow is maybe a couple catches out of the backfield. It's an offense that's going to throw the football. They're going to throw the football inside the red zone, but they're going to get a lot of their touches. They're just going to have spike weeks. They're just going to have spike weeks, and that's okay. I think it's fine to have a running back here if he's your RB3 that's better. I think he's a decent. I like a lot of these guys. I think are decent targets like Rashad White, Javonte Williams, Pacheco, James Cook, Montgomery for the zero RB people. Khalil Herbert, James Conner. Here's at RB30. I know Jake and Jeff Ratcliffe have him a little bit earlier in their rankings. He could lead the team in catches. He could get another 50 catches. It's going to be the worst team in the NFL. So I just don't really want a piece of him, but he is undervalued. Nobody wants him. He's going to fall down draft boards. I mean, he's a body that you can plug in as a flex play, maybe an RB2 if you get into some issues. The team will be playing from behind quite a bit, but he is going to be at least getting some targets in there as well. Brian Robinson Jr. is the goal line back. We'll get into Gibson in a second. A.J. Dillon, really strong finish towards last season as well, and that's what I talked about with Aaron Jones and him. James Cook is trending up, and I'm buying. I really am. I'm not a big believer in Damian Harris. I think he can fall into 8 touchdowns, but not 100% healthy. And then here is you see the two Jets guys, and Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook at 26 and 27. I just think it's a big mess, and I'm just not really interested in getting into that mess. If one of those guys do fall outside round 6, I'll take a shot on them. But I think Cook really is the guy to start the season, and then Breece Hall is the guy maybe to finish the season. As for Rashad White, there's some good and some bad as well. I think, he could be a bell cow back. The reason I believe that is because he got 50 of his 58 targets last year. And Fournette, who had 83 targets, the fourth most at the running back position, is gone. Tom Brady, a big reason why there were so many targets to those running backs. It was a pass-happy offense for sure. But I think bringing in offensive coordinator Dave Canales, who spent 13 years with Seattle, has been known for, running the football, a lot of zone instead of gap concepts, which is what Tampa ran a lot of last year. Zone will create some double teams at the line of scrimmage and will open up some avenues for Rashad White. And I really like what what Dave Canales has said about him overall as a player. He said he wanted to get the ball in his hands in space, use him in different ways, called him a three down back, said there's some versatility in his game as well. Chase Edmonds I don't believe in. Not a whole lot. Like Chase Edmonds was a guy that a lot of people liked this time of the year in Miami, but he didn't do anything that blew us away. And yeah, he may get some third down touches and things like that. But Rashad White, I think, is the best back going outside RB25 who could get 300 plus touches. The offense isn't going to be great. It's not Tom Brady. I understand that, but they still have some players on offense and they still have some players on defense. And I do believe this outlook, this new look offensively with some run schemes, some zone schemes will help out Rashad White. At least 15 touches in games that he had 15 touches. He averaged 82 total yards. I think he 250 carries, 50 catches, 300 touches. It's not too bad. So I'm a big fan of the change at the offensive coordinator. I like Sean Tucker. I think maybe as a late round flyer pick for you. He probably would have been drafted if he didn't have any health concerns ultimately. But Rashad White's the guy. We're running a little long, but want to keep going here. Got 2 more tiers here to show just quickly. So we'll rapid fire through this. On the left side is just your pass catching running backs: McKinnon, Antonio Gibson, DeAndre Swift, Samaje Perine. I got Charbonnet in there, Jalen Warren, and then some veterans who could be some goal line backs there. Jamal Williams led the NFL in rushing touchdowns last year. He also led the NFL in red zone rushing attempts, but we're going to see Kamara in there, and we got Kendra Miller. There's a lot going on there. Zeke, as we talked about, goal line opportunities certainly going to be available to him. He's been going as RB50 at Underdog Fantasy and a sleeper, so got him a little bit higher than that. On the right side here, Raheem Mostert, I think the big winners here today, although Kareem Hunt could sign, Leonard Fournette could sign, is Miami didn't bring in Cook. They didn't bring in Zeke. So Raheem Mostert is the lead, but there'll be a lot going on here. Jeff Wilson's in here. Devon Achane's in here. I think Devon Achane, Rashawn Johnson are great targets towards, round 12 or so. Be patient with them. Cam Akers, Javonte Williams were league winners in the second half of their rookie season. So you may have to be a bit patient with both of those guys. Harris, good offense. You're just looking for some touchdowns. Elijah Mitchell, don't draft him. You draft CMC. Don't draft your handcuff. Draft other handcuffs. And for the Philly backfield, Kenneth Gainwell has touched the ball more than anybody. He didn't play in that first preseason game. He's actually the guy that's been on the team the longest in terms of Gainwell, Penny, and Swift. Penny and Swift haven't shown us that they can be healthy. They haven't had full seasons in the NFL. You have to limit them. I think it's going to be a mess. I think you want to stay away from all of them. Gainwell's the cheapest. He's probably going to be the guy that starts week 1 New England. We're going to see Penny potentially as the goal line back, first and second down reps. Swift not getting a lot of those reps, catching balls out of the backfield. Jalen Hurts led all quarterbacks and goal line carries. So it's just a complete mess. Why not take the cheapest guy? And then we have one more tier here is tier 8, just some upside guys towards the end of your draft. Zamir White. You just don't know what's going to happen here with Jacobs. You could take Jacobs and Zamir White, get it covered. I mean, that's not a bad strategy, even though I don't like handcuffs. That's one that I can get behind. Ty Chandler, I think we're going to be looking at Minnesota's backfield as close to a committee. Like maybe a 60-40, maybe Ty Chandler, McBride sprinkled in there. I just don't think Madison's that efficient of a running back. And Ty Chandler is a good pass-catching back. And, week 1 of the preseason, just preseason, he showed me a few things, and I think he's going to be involved for sure. Deuce Vaughn is another guy, right? A little gadget type player, maybe third down situations, hard to tackle. Darren Sproles, very Darren Sproles-like, and Sproles had some great campaigns in the NFL with, the Saints and the Eagles and the Chargers did some good things. Tajay Spears, Tyler Algier, just kind of handcuffs, right? Again, don't handcuff your back, somebody else. Deontay Foreman, Kendra Miller, Chuba Hubbard, and Gus Edwards there as well. So those are the running back tiers. Got the one comment there. No Aaron Jones. Shake my head out of here. We got to get out. We'll say goodbye. Game Plus Network, we do appreciate you as always. We'll do some other tiers, quarterbacks and tight ends, but hopefully you guys got something out of this. We'll say goodbye. George, take me out of here. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Cheers.